Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our town hall tonight. We're glad that you're joining us. This is one of a number of events that we're having on virtual sessions we're having on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, and as you see today, ESF TV on YouTube. This all relates to our fall semester opening and our attention to COVID-19. The other sessions that we've had already, the other town hall sessions we've had, were focused on student life, graduate students, academics broadly speaking. That was our plan for classes and what we're going to be doing this semester relating to academics and research, and our overall restart plan. You can find all of these at our website, esf.edu/restart. I will type that in our chat box when I'm done with my introductions and our other speakers are speaking. But again, it's esf.edu/restart. Tonight's town hall will focus on what we're broadly referring to as student finances. This will be related to questions you might have about finances as a parent, a guardian, or students. Our next town hall, which is next week at 11 o'clock on Wednesday the 12th, will be focused on health and safety. I raise this because we really want people to focus their questions tonight on the finance issues, and there will be an opportunity next week for a broad discussion about health and safety. We have a lot of other updates on that ESF Restart webpage, so go there and check it out. There's a wealth of information there. We've had numerous working groups and individuals working on this issue for months. You'll see the product of their work there. In fact, what you'll see there is the restart plan that was just updated today and sent to the State University of New York, which is required. So there's an updated version of that already posted on our webpage today. We are also pushing many of these things and these news items and updates through our social media channels and email. And as was mentioned in a town hall earlier today we had on student life, email is the primary mode that we're trying to communicate with students. And I say this because it's important that our students and families understand that. So if students are having email problems, so at the earlier town hall today we heard about some issues students were having, particularly grad students, with emails, you need to let us know, because we've started to look into this. We found that some student email mailboxes are full, so that's bouncing emails out. Some students have chosen to opt out of some of the emails we sent via constant contact. The syr.edu address that our students have, sometimes there are issues with that and we're working on. So again, if you're having any email problems or students are having any email problems, please let us know. And I'm going to put an address in the chat box when I'm done, but basically it's communications@esf.edu. Communications@esf.edu. So please send a message there if you or your students are having email problems, and we'll work to correct those. I'd like to introduce our other speakers that we have before I provide some more guidance on how we'll go forward with the town hall today. First, to my right, is Joe Rufo. Joe is our officer in charge. He's going to talk a little bit about what that means. He's also our chief financial officer, and he's our vice president for administration. Joe has been with the college for 12 years. Before that, he was the chief financial officer at Onondaga Community College, located here in Syracuse. And before that, he was with National Grid, which some of you may know is one of the largest utilities in the country. He's also been an assistant professor of economics at SUNY Cortland, and he's also taught economics here at ESF. Welcome, Joe. We also have Mark Hill to my left. Mark is our director of financial aid at the college. He's been in that role for 6 years, and he's been with the college for 7 years. Before that, he was scholarship coordinator at SUNY Potsdam. Now, you may not notice this, but we are 6 feet apart here. There's little pieces of tape telling us where to sit, so we are socially distancing here for this event. All right, how we'd like to do questions. We've created a Google Doc, and it was really suggested by our Office for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity, and we think this is a good mechanism to use. You will see a URL in a minute that will direct you to this, and we'll put it in the chat box in a second as well. But this is how we would like you to submit questions to us. The reason that we're doing this is that document will stay live after this town hall. So you'll be able to, if you think about something that you didn't ask tonight, you'll be able to go back to that live document and put your question there. I'm going to be monitoring the Google Doc here to my left, and I'm going to be looking at those questions and make sure I get those to the right people here. We have the chat function too on the YouTube channel, We know some people will be putting questions there as well, but it's going to be easier for me to follow on the Google Doc the questions that we get. If we do get any questions in the chat box, we will be certain to transition those over to the Google Doc after we're done with the town hall. And if we have time, I'll actually look over to the chat box and see if there's any questions that I didn't get to on the Google Doc. The bottom line here is the intent is we will answer every question that we get. Whether we answer them tonight or not, we will definitely answer them after the town hall if we're not able to answer some of these questions tonight. I also want to make a suggestion to you that if you would jot down the questions you have as both Joe and Mark are doing their presentation, because what we might find is by the time both of those presentations are done, your questions might be answered by them during their presentations. So what we'll do when they're both done is I'll give you a second to go back to where you wrote down your question and give you a chance to put it in the Google Doc. I think that'll also make this go a little bit more efficient. Again, I'll give you plenty of time to do that. So I think that's it. Again, please submit your questions after tonight on the URL that you'll be getting in a minute, but you can also, there it is right there, you'll also be able to submit them to that email address, which I'll type in the chat box again, which is communications@esf.edu. So with that, let me turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate everyone here who's tuned in tonight. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. Again, my name is Joe Rufo, and one of my titles temporarily is Officer in Charge, and as Mark noted, he'd like me to explain exactly what that means. It's a bit of an odd title, but quite simply, the Officer in Charge is a title that the SUNY Chancellor appoints in the absence of a president, in the temporary absence of a president who has been formally appointed by the SUNY Board of Trustees. Back in early June, our previous president, Dr. David Amberg, went back to his position at Upstate Medical University, and as such, the Chancellor reached out to me, asked if I would be willing to serve as what's called an Officer in Charge, which is essentially the chief administrative officer of the college. And I will be that until such time as a new president is appointed and seated. So you can think of it as an acting president. A few opening remarks. To say that preparing for the 2021 academic year has been a challenge is quite an understatement. Given the enormous uncertainties that we've been facing, which have been brought about by the COVID pandemic, it wasn't until fairly recently that we had a clearer picture, not a perfect picture, but a clearer picture of how the 2020-2021 academic year would actually play out. All kinds of questions. Will students be back on campus? What will the classes look like? What will we do with respect to health and safety? A whole myriad of questions that we've had to address. As Mark noted, we did provide a campus restart plan, as did many other SUNY campuses. We provided that to New York State. The production of that plan, the development of the plan, internal review of the plan, getting the approvals from SUNY and New York State, that all took time. All of those factors played into the fact that we're here today on August 5th, as opposed to having been able to get you this information weeks earlier. Mark, again, I'll point out that Mark has pointed to the website, the www.edu or esf.edu/restart. Our restart plan can be found there. Now, the restart plan addresses all the various elements of operations at the college. It goes well beyond health and safety. While the primary focus of the restart plan is to ensuring a safe campus, is to ensuring the health and safety and the well-being of our campus community, the COVID pandemic really impacted all the operations across the college. It's not simply health and safety, but it's really everything we do. And so for tonight's session, we're going to focus on student finances and how the restart plan and how the COVID pandemic really impacted our student finances. Mark Hill will be talking about financial aid. I'll be talking about things like tuition and fees. I'll be addressing Centennial Hall options, our student residence facility, and I'll also be briefly touching on meal plans. And as was noted, an entirely separate town hall will be held on August 12th at 11 a.m. that will focus exclusively on our health and safety-related efforts. I'd also like to remind our undergraduate students and parents and guardians of a July 30th email that was sent by our provost, Dr. David Newman. And that email communication discussed some factors around students who wish to take all of their classes online. Now, we're going to offer the option for some students who are able to create a schedule for the fall that would put all their classes online to do so. Now, this doesn't mean that all students will be able to do that, simply because of the fact that a number of courses aren't offered online, and students may need those courses this fall. However, if students do wish to take all their courses online, there were a number of points to consider in that email, including things like student housing and the fact that for our first-year students, if in fact one of our first-year students are taking all their courses online, there is an opportunity to waive out of the mandate to live in Centennial Hall. It also includes a link to our 2020-21 undergraduate tuition and fee schedule. However, I will say that the entire tuition and fee schedule for 2021 is also included on our website. It's been uploaded, and that can be found at esf.edu/Bursar. That's esf.edu/Bursar. And that has all of the tuition and fee figures that you'll hear me talking about tonight. As I'm going through these, you may be tempted to take notes, or you're going to be rushing to write them all down. That's not necessary. You can find them all at that website address. In addition, you'll be seeing even more information on tuition and fees, which will show you the prorated amounts that students who are taking, who are part-time and taking less than the full-time credit hour load will be paying. Now, next I'll be presenting a number of slides detailing the tuition and fees for the various cohorts of students that we have here at ESF. I'll be reviewing tuition and fees that would be paid by students who are New York State residents and students that are not New York State residents, undergraduate students and graduate students, as well as students taking courses primarily online. And it's important to keep in mind as you look at these tuition and fee numbers that this, of course, is, these are the costs prior to any financial aid that will be applied. And of course, Mark Hill is here to talk about financial aid and answer your questions with respect to student financial aid and how things may have changed or been revised this year to help accommodate families during the COVID pandemic. As for tuition, I want to mention this, that that the rates you're going to see, the tuition rates you're going to see in my presentation a rate for a semester rate and an annual rate. Now, we can guarantee that we've locked into the semester rate for the fall of 2020. So for this fall, the rates you see, the semester rate, will be the rate that you pay. And you can see on the screen now that the New York State resident rate of $3,535, that's guaranteed for this fall. The annual rate that you see, the $7,070, that rate assumes that there's no change in tuition. We don't know if that'll be the case. Our tuition rates are in fact set not by the ESF administration, but final approval is given by the SUNY Board of Trustees. There has been no further action, that I know of pending relative to any change in tuition rates, but it's certainly possible. So again, the rates that you'll see for the semester, you can depend on those rates for the fall relative to tuition, but as far as the annual rate, in this case for the New York State resident undergraduate students, that 7,070 number may be adjusted. And if it's adjusted upward, I would suspect it would be a very modest increase. Where the fees are concerned, I'd like to say a few things about the fees. I'd like to explain what they're for and a little bit about the student fees that you'll see. The fees that I'll be presenting are what we call broad-based fees. So these are the fees that are charged to all students. So what you won't see tonight in my presentation are fees that are specific to an individual class. So let's say that a student is taking a chemistry class. There could be materials and supplies that they're required to purchase for that particular class, and there will be a modest fee for that. Those types of fees, those class fees, those individual lab fees, those won't be shown tonight. But what you will see are these broad-based fees, the fees that all students pay. And the total amount for that broad-based fee package probably comprises, on average, about 95% of the total fee, amount that any one student would have to pay. So, a few other things about fees. I want to also stress that the fees that are paid by students, these fees go to pay for specific activities or services. And when a student pays a fee for a particular activity or service, let's say intercollegiate athletics, the revenue that we get from that fee goes to intercollegiate athletics, and it's restricted to that service or fee. We're unable to, nor would we want to, take any of that money and use it for something else. We wouldn't take intercollegiate athletic fee revenue and use it to pay for, say, our utility bills or some other material and supplies or some other operating expense. So these fees that you're going to see, with the exception of one, which I'll point out, are restricted to be used only for that particular activity. Also, how do we come up with the fees? How do we come up with these numbers? Essentially, these fees are designed to cover the costs to the college of providing whatever that particular service or activity is. In some cases, we aren't able to collect the full cost of the service or activity, and in that case, the college makes up the difference. We won't show a year-by-year comparison, but I can tell you that the fees you're going to see today, on average, are about 3% or on average about $50 less than an equivalent fee package from last year. So overall, tuition for the fall, no change from last year, and the fees for the fall, and for the spring for that matter, will be less than last year. So I feel good about that. I feel good that at least with respect to the impact that this terrible pandemic has had on households, at least we've been able to keep tuition flat and, again, have been able to offer a modest decrease in the cost of those fees. Now, in terms of the fees themselves, let me just describe briefly what each fee pays for. The first you'll see is the college fee. And the college fee is, in fact, the oldest fee SUNY has. And this is the one exception I was talking about. The college fee was put in place decades ago. It was the first SUNY fee, and it was meant to help offset the operating costs of the college. It's set by SUNY policy. We don't set that fee. We don't advocate for an amount. We don't do any kind of cost analysis. This is simply a flat fee that is based on SUNY policy. It's one of the more modest fees as you'll see on the screen, for undergraduate New York State residents, you'll see it's $25 a semester or $50 for the year. Then we get into our largest fee, which is the student services fee. This is the fee that pays for the bundle of services that we receive from Syracuse University. You know, one of the wonderful things about ESF is we're a small campus, and yet our students and our faculty and our campus community have wide access to what Syracuse University offers. Their campus is contiguous to ours. It's right across the street, right across Forestry Drive. The dome is probably 100 feet from my office, or maybe it's 300 feet. Point is, they're right next door. And the great thing about that is that our students can enjoy a small campus experience at ESF, while at the same time being able to participate in virtually all of the same activities and services that are provided to Syracuse University students. In addition, our faculty have partnerships at ESF at Syracuse University, in addition to our staff. So the student services fee, which is the largest fee, pays for that entire portfolio of services. Briefly, that includes things like recreation, student and co-curricular activities, what's called disability services, if a student, for example, needs an accommodation, more time for a test or something along those lines, and also information technology. One of the things that many people might not know is that we rely on Syracuse University for a good deal of our information technology services. We rely on their platforms for things like our internet service and a number of other IT type of infrastructure activities that are in the background. So the student services fee it is our largest fee, but it provides a tremendous value to our students and to our campus community. We also have what's called a technology fee. That goes to pay for our own ESF IT infrastructure. It goes to maintain our student computing infrastructure, things like smart classrooms, computer labs, remote access, all those sorts of IT type of services and material and infrastructure that we see on our campus. Matter of fact, it goes to pay for a number of smart classrooms that we're outfitting for this coming fall to accommodate some of our hybrid classes where students will be in the classroom for part of the time and online for part of the time. There's also a student health and counseling fee. Like Syracuse University, we've been very fortunate to partnership with respect to student health with Crouse Medical Practice and Crouse Hospital. We're a small campus. We don't have an on-campus health center, but what we do have, literally 1 block away, is Crouse Medical Practice, which has dozens of physicians, dozens of different practices that our students have access to, in addition to Crouse Hospital, which is right across the street. So if a student gets ill, feels sick, or hopefully not, but needs some kind of hospital service, Crouse is there. Another great partnership we have. We have a small campus, but we have this great partnership with Syracuse University and this great partnership with Crouse Medical Practice and Crouse Hospital. That student health and counseling fee, part of it goes to pay for that. Now, I've often received the question that goes like this. If my student goes to Crouse Medical Practice and they use their insurance, why am I paying an additional amount of money, right? If I go to the doctor and I use my insurance, I might have a co-payment, but what's with the additional fee? Well, the fee for the Crouse services goes to pay for what Crouse has done for us. Crouse Medical Practice has essentially established a medical practice within a medical practice. They've established an ESF customized medical practice within their larger medical practice that's exclusive for just our students. So when our students go to Crouse Medical Practice to see a physician for testing, whatever it happens to be, they don't go with Crouse Medical Practice's general patient population, but they go to a special spot in that building where only ESF students go. And we're also paying, the student fee also goes to pay for access. Keep in mind that we have 2,000 students, and in order to guarantee access for all of our 2,000 students, that medical practice within a medical practice, Crouse needed to hire additional people, material, supplies, et cetera. So that's the answer to the question, why do I, as a student, need to pay an additional fee for health services when in fact, when I'm home, I just use my insurance. As far as counseling goes, the counseling portion of that fee goes to pay for our student counseling services, mental health services, which are provided through Dean Lombard's office, the Student Services Office, here on our campus. There's also an intercollegiate athletics fee. That should be pretty self-explanatory. That pays for outfitting teams, it pays for travel, it pays for transportation, et cetera. I will point out, and I'm looking at the screen now, you'll see a $50 semester and a $100 annual charge. We were actually approved for about double that. When we submitted our fee request, we asked for almost double that. SUNY approved a fee of almost $200. What we've done with intercollegiate athletics is we've pared that down, given the fact that we won't have any actual intercollegiate contests going on this fall. Like many conferences, the various associations and conferences that ESF belongs to have canceled their games. There's still a cost. We still have costs to pay our athletic staff who are still here and who are providing training and a host of other activities and practices for students who are still here, who are still involved, but simply not competing in intercollegiate events and games. There's also a transcripts fee. That's fairly self-explanatory. That goes to pay for providing transcripts to students. And then there's two other fees. There's two other student activity fees at the bottom. You'll see one that says student activity fee ESF and student activity fee SU. And the question is, what are those all about, right? Well, those two fees are actually not set by SUNY. The amounts are not set by ESF administration. Those are set by the students. These are the fees that we collect on behalf of the students, and the fee revenue is used by the students, by the student associations, to run their clubs, to sponsor events, to sponsor speakers. So those fees, currently it's set at $175 for the year. Those fees, the ESF portion, the ESF line is set by our student association. And then there's the SU line, right? I think it was $36. The SU line, yeah, there it is, $36. Why is my student paying an SU student activity fee? Well, this goes back to our relationship with SU. Our student associations, in conjunction with the Syracuse University Student Associations, get together and they determine a fee, in this case $36, that our students will pay to access the various events and activities that are provided by the Syracuse University Student Associations. So again, it's part of that great partnership we have. Now, turning to tuition and fees, I'd like to begin there next. I'll take a breath. Again, all these tuition and fee numbers can be found on our website, esf.edu/Bursar, B-U-R-S-A-R. So, the first cohort we're looking at is tuition and fees for our undergraduate New York State resident students. The tuition, again, I've talked about this a bit. I'll talk about the annual numbers as I'm going through these, $7,070. And then there's that package of fees, 8 separate fees totaling $2,056 for a total of $9,126 for the semester. Now, what will be the same for all of these is these are assuming that we go through the year and we're able to remain on campus. That's our wish, that's our hope. But of course, with the COVID pandemic, we'd never know. In the very unfortunate event that we need to send our students home and complete the semester with our students at home, we will go through a refund process similar to what we had done this past spring. So those of you who are here for the spring know that we went through and we calculated refunds for a number of those fees. Tuition remained the same. We didn't refund tuition because students were still able to take their courses, albeit online. But again, the tuition, no change from last year. The fees, less than last year. Moving on to the undergraduate non-New York State resident students. Our students from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Jersey, out west, Texas, from all over the U.S. These are the non-New York State resident numbers. You'll see that the fees are the same. That same package of 8 fees is $2,056 in total. The tuition, the annual number here for out-of-state students, $16,980 for a total of $19,036. And again, all these can be seen on our website. Undergraduate New York State resident online, okay, online costs. In this case, tuition's the same, but you'll see that the 8 separate fees total $1,622. So it's a little bit less, given the fact that the students will be online. The total, assuming all goes as we hope, the total for our undergraduate New York State resident students who do choose and are able to take all their courses online will be $8,692. Again, we have that option open, assuming that students are able to build a fall 2020 schedule, which in fact has the courses they need, and those courses are in fact provided online. Moving to the undergraduate non-New York State resident online. Right now, for the non-New York State resident online, tuition is the same at $16,980. We have well, it's the same as it's the same as the non-online, non-New York State resident students. The fee package is the same, package of 8 fees, $1,622, and the total being $18,602. Now, moving on to our graduate students. Starting off the same way, we look at our New York State residents for grad students. In this case, the tuition annualized is $11,310 for our New York State resident graduate students. In this case, we have 7 separate fees, the difference being that the graduate students are not charged for the intercollegiate athletics fee. That package of 7 fees total $1,875 for a total of $13,185 for a full year for our New York State resident students who are in our graduate programs. Tuition and fees for our graduate students who are non-New York State residents. In this case, the non-New York State residents, same as the undergraduate students, have a higher annual tuition rate. In this case, it's $23,100 for tuition for the year. The same package of fees, the same total cost for the fees, $1,875. And for our graduate students who are non-New York State residents, the total for the year is $24,975. Moving on to our tuition and fee schedule for graduate students who are New York State residents, but who are able to take all their courses online. And again, all of these are for full-time students. And again, if you go online, look at the Bursar website, you'll see the prorated numbers, as I've said, for students who are not full-time. In this case, the graduate students who are New York State residents, who take all their courses online, tuition, $11,310. The 7 separate fees total $1,441. Again, a bit lower because of the online nature of their coursework, for a total of $12,751. Moving on, graduate students who are non-New York State residents, but who take all their courses online, the same non-New York State resident tuition rate of $23,100. The annual fee package, 7 fees totaling $1,441, as with the resident students, and for a total of $24,541, the annual cost to our graduate non-New York State resident students who take all their courses online. That's all the information I have to present right now on tuition and fees. I know it was a lot. Again, I'll refer you to the website. Hopefully you didn't have to scramble to write down all the numbers. You can find them all on the website. They're PDFs, you can print them off and have them available. A few words about Centennial Hall, room rates and options, and a few words on meal plans. Our Centennial Hall room rates, that's our student residence, which opened in, I think it was 2011. Our 100th anniversary, hence the name Centennial Hall. We are offering 7 different options. I won't go through them all. I just wanted to make you aware of them. The Centennial Hall website is shown at the bottom. That's Centennial Hall ESF, one word, .com. And that's a website specific to Centennial Hall. And besides these numbers and these options that you're seeing here, these 7 options, it also provides a wealth of information relative to floor plans, amenities, and everything else you'd want to know about Centennial Hall, about life in Centennial Hall, what it offers our students. It's a beautiful building. It's a relatively new building, stickly furniture. I mean, it's really well fitted. So those are the options, the 7 options, all the way from a bedroom suite double all the way to a deluxe single. And those are the semester numbers and the annualized numbers. These shouldn't change. Unlike the tuition numbers, these numbers shouldn't change for the 2020, 2021 academic year. And finally, moving on to meal plans. What I'm showing there is a cut and paste from the Syracuse University website. As many of you may know, Syracuse University provides dining services and regular meal plans for ESF students. All ESF students who are either required to be on a regular meal plan or who choose to be on a regular meal plan go to this website. The URL is at the bottom. It's a rather long one. It's the housingmealplans.syr.edu. It provides a wealth of information, again, on meal plan offerings. The green arrow at the bottom shows where you need to click to bring up the meal plans that are being offered to ESF students. There's a number of options, all the way from a 7-meal-a-week plan, which I certainly couldn't live on, all the way up to a 21-meal-a-week meal plan. So those options are out there. I would encourage you to go and check that website out. And finally, the last thing I want to say is to talk a little bit about meal plans relative to the ESF Trailhead Cafe. We don't have a dining hall. We don't have regular meal plans, which is why we partner with Syracuse University. Again, another aspect of this great partnership we have. But we do have a great what we call the Trailhead Cafe that's located in our new Gateway building. And the Trailhead Cafe website is shown there at the bottom. And a point I want to make here is for our ESF first-year students who choose a Syracuse University plan that offers only 7 or 10 meals a week, we're requiring our students to purchase an additional $415 worth of credit so that they can use Trailhead. We really are looking at the welfare of our students, and we don't want first-year students to have to rely solely on 7 or 10 meals a week. So we're requiring them to purchase this $415 Trailhead account. Having said that, anyone can visit the Trailhead Cafe. We're not limiting it to these students who I've mentioned. It's a great place. It's used by faculty and staff alike. We even get some of the construction workers over at the Carrier Dome, or maybe it's just the Dome these days. We get many of those folks coming over early in the morning. They love it. Pete Sala, who runs the Dome, he said to me many times that they love the Trailhead Cafe. It's a great place. They have great offerings. They have a great manager. It's actually operated by our partners at Morrisville. It's been operated now for a number of years. They do a wonderful job. So if you happen to be on campus, I would certainly recommend and suggest that you pay a visit. Mark, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I know we've received a couple of questions here saying that people want to get to our questions. As I just mentioned in the chat box, we're going to stay here after 8 o'clock to be sure that we get to as many of these as possible. And I want to reiterate something I said earlier. Please use the Google Doc for questions. I'm going to focus on that first, and then I'll go to the chat box if we have time. And again, I mentioned the reasons why we're trying to use the Google Doc. It'll be a live document that will stay live after this meeting. It's going to be easier for us to respond to your questions now and later through that document. So again, some of you are putting questions in both places. That's fine. I will look at the Google Doc, then I'm going to go back to the chat box and see if we didn't address all those questions, but we might not be able to get to all those right now tonight, but we will answer all these questions, whether tonight or after tonight. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to just first start by welcoming everyone and thank you for joining us, and also wish you all good health during these difficult times. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. I know we have a lot of questions we'll probably want to get to. And what I'd like to do is kind of go through the hot topics, as I like to think of them, or the things that make our phones ring and fill up our email inboxes. So hopefully that'll address a number of questions that you might have. And then I'd also like to point out that you are more than welcome to reach out to our office anytime and ask any other questions that you might have. So one of the first things I want to touch upon is just how do you access financial aid information? And you may be aware that ESF is moving to a new student information system known as Banner. So for our new students, you may be used to getting your information through the admissions applicant portal. For our current or continuing students, you may be used to going through the My ESF portal to get all of your information. For the 2020, 2021 year and forward, all of your financial aid information will now be available in what we're calling the self-service portal. So we've tried to do some messaging on that, and when we have a financial aid package available for a student, we send an email notice with a link to that. But we also have links on all of our financial aid pages where you can go to get to this new portal. And you can see the link that's there. So rather than give you the very long link that comes with that portal, I would suggest that folks go to that website, and on the upper right-hand corner of all of our pages, we have a small box which says access your financial aid account, and you can simply click on the appropriate link to get into the new portal to view your financial aid information. We're getting a lot of inquiries actually about how to find the financial aid. I think a lot of our current students are still going into My ESF and finding that there does not seem to be any financial aid info there. So make sure you're going to that right location. Another important piece of this is when you get into that new portal, the very first page is going to show a list of requirements that are out there for all of our students. So it's important that as a first step, students look through that information and make sure that they're looking at what is required and taking care of those steps, and then going further in to look at their actual financial aid package. Next, I'd like to go into the Excelsior Scholarship. I know a lot of families are concerned about what's going to happen with the Excelsior Scholarship, very anxious to be able to apply and be sure they're going to be able to get funding through this program. So what I can tell you right now is that the application for new students or new applicants for the program is available on the website of the Higher Education Services Corporation that you can see there. What they have said is that they will accept applications and they will begin to process them, but they will not finish that process until they have more information about potential funding coming from the federal government to be able to help support the program. So for new students, unfortunately, you can apply, but you may not know for a while in terms of eligibility. For our current students who are already recipients of the Excelsior program, there is no need to apply again, except that students should make sure that they complete their TAP application as they would every year. As far as guidance for the program, what we are being told is that there may be a priority placed upon current recipients of the program, and that amounts could be reduced, or that new applicants may not be able to get the program depending on what kind of funding is available. So we'll provide more information as we know about that. The application deadline right now is the end of this month, although it has been indicated that that may be extended depending on how circumstances may change. We're also getting a lot of inquiries about the CARES Act grants. I'm hoping everyone has heard of the CARES Act from the federal government. And as most schools, ESF received funding from that CARES Act. And we received a portion of funding that was meant to support students. And that is known as the Higher Ed Emergency Relief Fund, or HERF. And we have taken a two-phase approach to how we would like to award that funding. We began with an application-based process in which our students have been able to submit an application, and they were asked to specifically indicate what kind of expenses they incurred due to the disruption to campus last semester. And we have a committee that's been reviewing those applications and determining eligibility. For phase two, we have gone with what's known as a block grant process, in which we have reviewed all of our students and determined a pool of potentially eligible students and reached out to them directly with paper forms that they can then return to us to potentially receive funding through this program. For both of these phases, we were supposed to prioritize students based on information from the FAFSA, meaning basically that these funds should go to students that have higher need first. So we have used the FAFSA information. You may have heard the term expected family contribution, and we have a tier-based system in which the students with a lower expected family contribution from the FAFSA are more likely to be eligible for this. So this is continuing as we go forward. The application-based phase is still open, and you can find information about that on our website. If you go to that same link that was provided earlier, you will see a banner on all of our financial aid pages for the CARES Act. You will also find a banner on the main ESF page for the CARES Act that will take you out to that website, and you can read about the program and obtain that application if a student would still like to pursue that. One note with this program is that this is right now only for students who were enrolled and impacted by the disruption to campus during the spring 2020 semester. This is the most recent spring semester. We've had a lot of calls and questions about incoming student eligibility, and the priority for this grant was to fund students who were impacted by the disruption. So we cannot assume that students have expenses incurred for an upcoming semester. We are potentially reserving some funding to support students if there are further disruptions, and that will be done based on a fund availability basis. Next, I want to get into what kind of adjustments you might see to financial aid packages for students who elect to go fully online. So you heard earlier that students may have the option to build their schedule around a fully online set of classes, and if so, they could waive out of the Centennial Hall rates. So if a student elects to do that, we will have to make a review and possible adjustments to a financial aid package. So the first step when we create an aid package is we create something known as the cost of attendance. And this is often misunderstood as a bill or a list of actual charges. But in fact, the cost of attendance is simply an estimate that we create very early before we start doing aid packages, which is meant to show what a student's costs would be for all the allowable expenses for 1 year of enrollment. So this will vary based on a student's status, where they choose to live, what level of enrollment they have, and so forth. So if a student makes adjustments or their situation changes, we may have to look at adjusting the cost of attendance to account for that. So for students who indicate and choose to go to a fully online schedule, we are going to review financial aid packages, and we are going to consider that all of those students are most likely to be living at home and at the commuter status. That means living with parents. Sometimes there's confusion over what commuter means. We have two distinct budgets, one for students who live off campus, which is different from students who live at home. So when we say commuter, that typically means a student who plans to live at home with parents. So as we adjust these financial aid packages, we're going to make changes to typically the room and meal amounts that we include in the cost of attendance. So for either an on-campus or an off-campus student, those amounts are typically much higher than for a student who is going to be living at home with the parents, and the assumption being that costs there are much lower because housing is already covered and you're looking more at just food. So you could see a significant decrease in the cost of attendance based on that change. You also may see a slight change in the total amount that we account for in fees based on the information that you've seen before. So as we make those adjustments, that could in turn mean that a student's financial need has changed, or it could mean that their eligibility for certain types of aid has changed, and we will have to adjust those as we go. So some examples there might be if a student is receiving one of our Centennial Hall scholarships, that requires that the student is living in Centennial Hall to receive that funding. So obviously, if a student's no longer going to be living there, that scholarship would need to be removed. In addition, the cost of attendance amount represents the maximum amount of financial aid that a student can receive. So as we lower that total cost of attendance, that could mean that a student's total eligibility has also gone down. Typically, unless we have no other choice, we will only reduce things like student loans and parent loans and work study to accommodate that sort of change. However, if the student's need level does change significantly, that could mean that eligibility for certain types of institutional aid may change as well. So it's important that students who are looking at that option to go online are aware that that could lead to aid changes, not only in the cost of attendance, but in the types of aid that may be offered, as well as the amounts that are offered. Now, to accommodate students who may be wondering what happens if they're not going to be living with parents but elect to go fully online, those students will be able to reach out to us, and we can do a review to confirm that they will be living off campus, and we would do a different adjustment to the cost of attendance in that scenario. And last thing I want to cover is the topic of refunds from financial aid and how to cover the different expenses that you might have. So it's always important to remember that if the student has elected or has to take a Syracuse University meal plan, there will be a separate bill for that. So ESF bills typically each semester will include tuition, fees, and for an on-campus student, the room charges, the Trailhead Cafe funds, and any other miscellaneous fees that might be there. An off-campus student would just have tuition and fees, and the bill for the Syracuse University meal plan would actually come separately. So even though we can provide aid for all of these expenses, we are not legally allowed to take financial aid that a student is receiving and apply that to a Syracuse University bill. So first, it's very important to make sure that you don't forget about that second bill. And then it's also important to not assume that any aid is going to pay that off for you. So instead, what will happen is students in many cases are eligible to receive a refund from their financial aid. So at the start of the semester, as the bills come out, any financial aid that a student is receiving will apply as a credit towards the charges on that ESF bill. And if there is a balance left over after that financial aid has been applied, that is what the student would need to pay. And then they would also need to make arrangements to pay their Syracuse University meal plan bill. However, if a student has more financial aid than is needed to cover the ESF bill, that excess would then be returned to the student as what's known as a financial aid refund. And it would then be the student's responsibility to make sure they use those refund monies to pay for the Syracuse University bill or buy books or use it for whatever other expenses they might have. So it's important that you plan out for that. And then lastly, in terms of actually getting refunds, the college has contracted with a third-party company by the name of Bank Mobile, which actually processes refunds for the school. And in order to have that work, students have to make a selection as to how they'd like to get their refunds. So you may have seen an envelope in the mail that would either be a bright orange or a bright green, and you may also have received emails that reference refundselection.com. And the idea here is that you can use this method to tell this company, Bank Mobile, how you'd like to get any financial aid refunds that you might be eligible to receive. So the three options would be the student can have funds deposited directly into an existing bank account, and they would just have to provide that bank information. The student can create a new bank account with that company and have the funds deposited directly there, or the student can elect to have a paper check mailed out to them. If a student does not make a selection, then a paper check would be the default option for how a refund would be given out. And one small note with that, if there is ever a refund that is due from excess on a parent's loan that a parent may elect to take out, those refunds do actually not go to the student through this process, but those are sent as checks to the borrower of that loan. So please be cautious and don't forget about those bills, and make sure if you haven't done so yet that you sign up for a refund method with this Bank Mobile. And Mark, that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much, Mark. Okay, I know many people waiting for the Q&A, and we're getting to that right now, and I just want to address a couple things in the chat. I think we got some good input that some people can't access the Google Doc. They might be on a mobile, totally legitimate concern. So again, we're committed to answering the questions in the chat box. We're going to have a transcript of that entire chat, so we will be sure we answer these and put them in the Google Doc. I'm going to try to organize some of these. They seem to be around some categorical areas. Excuse me. Mark, CARES, can you, since you just talked about that, can you talk a little bit more about CARES, particularly questions around, is it available for grad students? We understand it's not available for international students, so could you just clarify that?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So the CARES Act, the guidance from the Department of Education with the CARES Act has actually varied a little bit over the last couple of months, but the predominant guidance right now is that students have to be eligible for Title IV funding, which means basically federal student aid in order to qualify for CARES Act funds. This does include both undergraduate and graduate students. So anyone is eligible to apply or was possibly in the pool of students that we have selected as potential recipients, and we have again prioritized those based on the information from the FAFSA. So Title IV eligibility or federal financial aid eligibility is tied to the FAFSA or the federal aid application. That process actually does a number of different checks and matches to make sure that a student meets all the requirements for those various aid programs. So by completing a FAFSA and passing all of those matches, that would mean that a student is eligible. So we have used that as our basis for determining eligibility. If we were able to offer federal aid to a student, we count that as being eligible. There are some tricky situations with that, however, because there are some students who may have a valid application and have passed all of those edits, but may be ineligible for aid for other reasons. For example, not meeting academic progress requirements or not being enrolled in enough credits to qualify for the aid sources. So those are some fairly rare situations where a student with an otherwise valid application may not qualify for the funding.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Also, a bunch of questions around fees and the potential of refunding fees, so I'm going to get to that in a minute. There's a bunch of those. But I think I can address some of these questions. There's quite a lot of questions around declaring online and some confusion about that, and I think most of these are from grad students. So I just want to mention that early next week, a very detailed email is coming out, I'm assuming from our graduate school, that helps answer a lot of these questions and gives a lot more direction on what to do. But I can answer one of the last ones, which is, can I mark myself fully online through Banner? And that is done through the ESF student portal. So be looking early next week for an email from the grad office. I'm assuming that's who it's going to come from. I'm looking to Stephanie from our communications office. Okay, but regardless, be looking for that email with detail. In the meantime, we'll make sure that the graduate school does get these questions so that they're sure that they're answering all of these about how to declare online, because there was a bunch of legitimate and very detailed questions about that here. Okay, so fees, and then I'm going to jump around a little bit here, Joe. These are mostly for you. Will printer credits be reimbursed from last semester because the computer lab's closed? And that's the nature of a lot of these questions.
Printer credits, wow, that's a great question. Will that be reimbursed? I don't know, but we'll find out.
Okay, so we'll answer that. Do trailhead dollars roll over from last year, or are they just gone?
Do you know, Dave?
We refunded them, I mean, we refunded balances due, they should have been refunded at
Yeah.
that balance. They roll from semester from the spring to the fall, but not across years.
Okay, so that's Dave Zwonkowski is off camera, our Director of Business Operations. And as far as trailhead dollars, they roll from one semester to the next, but not to the next year.
If they didn't do the refund, they should check it,
Yeah.
we refunded it.
And Morrisville, who runs the trailhead, we had worked with them this past spring relative to providing refunds for trailhead dollars that weren't able to be used. And if you didn't get, if you were do a refund and you didn't get one, call our business office, and we'll provide in the chat the phone number.
Okay. Joe, I think you answered some of these. I was looking at the questions coming in, so I'm sorry if I missed your answer on some of these. You talked about the athletics fee and why that still was in place, so I think you already answered that one. But the question also is, the question was, will the athletics fee be refunded from the last semester? But they also were asking, will the technology fees be refunded because the computer labs were shut down mid-semester? This is similar to the printer question and the trailhead question.
Well, if we're talking about last year, we had processed those refunds. We had gone through those services that were available, which is versus those services that weren't available to students who are fully online. When it comes to IT-related costs, that technology fee money, for the most part, that is not refundable, only because of the fact that we're still using a great deal of technology in order to continue to provide the coursework online. So the tech fee, the refunding of the tech fee is something that we'd have to look at if in fact we had to close down again. And of course, the broader answer here relative to refunds looking forward is that should we need to close down, and I certainly hope we don't, But in the event that we do close down, we have to consider when that happens and which services students who were forced to go all online either was not available to them, or the operational costs that we incurred on campus, even though the students were off campus, whether that operational cost still applied, whether or not we still had to spend money to maintain operations relative to a particular service. So it was really a case-by-case basis relative to the fees as we look forward. You know, it's the kind of question where you can't really give a specific answer relative to fees going forward. But again, we assess what was not available to students and what sort of money did the college still have to expend in order to provide the support for the online coursework.
Okay, and again, associated with that, projecting worst-case scenario, if we have to move online completely mid-semester, how does that impact the fees and what we do with fees? And then I have a follow-up question related to that also.
Okay. Well, let's say in the hypothetical here that we had to send everybody home on October 15th, right? So in that case, you'd look at the fees that were billed, the fee revenue or the fees that were paid by students. You'd look at the date you closed, you'd prorate that date against the fee, and the refunds would, in a large sense, the refunds would be based that way. And again, we'd have to look at each individual fee to see which ones would continue to be appropriate to charge, even if students were in fact taking all their coursework online. You know, again, it's the kind of answer that you can't give in specifics at this point. There's no way to know when we'll be closed down, or when we may have to shut down and have our students go home, or what that might look like. So we'll just have to wait and see. And so the refund process, the work that we go through and the analysis we go through will be similar to what we had to do this past spring in terms of providing refunds, not only with respect to fees, but also with respect to Centennial Hall charges, and as Mark Hill had mentioned, the Syracuse University meal plans, and of course the Trailhead dollar refunds.
Okay, and as I said, a follow-up to that is, and I know the answer to this one, but would we recoup students for costs associated to moving to Syracuse and back home early, and for being here and have to contend with any of the risks that might be?
I'm sorry, what would we?
If we closed mid-semester, would we recoup students for the costs they incurred?
Reimbursed.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, reimbursed, yes.
Yes. Unfortunately not, no. So if student had to, if again, hypothetical, if we had to send everyone home on October 15th, there would be no dollars that would be refunded to students or reimbursed to students for the cost of moving out.
This one relates to clubs and fees. So if clubs are pretty much going all online with their activities, why do they need to pay for something they're not going to be doing in person?
Good question. The clubs, the student clubs, are paid for by means of that $175 for undergrads, the $175 student activity fee. And as I said, that is determined, that amount is determined by, in the case of undergraduates, the Undergraduate Student Association. So what I would suggest is students direct their questions to the student officers, since they're the ones who would be determining what that fee should be for the fall. We haven't heard anything yet, any updates from the student officers. If we do, if they decided, for example, that it would go from $175 down to $50, then the difference would be refunded, certainly.
Okay. Just scanning here to see if there's anything else about fees. The technology fee, question about if we have fully online students, they calculated the fee to be $200. How does that work?
I'm sorry, I don't quite.
The technology fee for fully online students is almost $200. How does that work?
Well, it takes into consideration the services that are still available and the cost to continue to accommodate students online. So for example, students who are fully online and who wouldn't be on campus wouldn't have available to them the computer labs, the smart classrooms, on-campus Wi-Fi, hardline internet, and those sorts of things. So so there's a calculation that's done then to determine what that difference is.
Okay. Do we know if Barnes, I know this was answered earlier, the gym, Barnes, is that going to be open for students that might be fully online but yet here in Syracuse?
That's a good question. You know, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
If you're fully online and you're an ESF student and you have an ESF ID card and the Barnes Center is open, albeit likely with some kind of social distancing protocols, I don't see why it wouldn't be. But of course, ultimately, that's a question for Syracuse University, but if it's open and you're a Syracuse student, I don't see why you couldn't use the Barnes Center.
Right, and it's acknowledged in the chat function here, and I was just reminded that we're not even sure it's going to open yet. Syracuse University needs to make that decision.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct, of course.
Okay. Mark, did you answer this? I apologize. How many credits must someone be enrolled in to qualify for CARES? Did you answer that?
Not specifically, no, but I would say that in most cases, a student would probably need to be in at least 6 credits to qualify for CARES Act, but there may be some cases, depending on a student's need level, where they might have been less than 6 credits and qualified. Keep in mind with all of that this is based on spring 2020 enrollment, so hopefully students aren't planning anything in anticipation of CARES Act. A majority of this money is intended to be for students who were impacted by the disruption. So we're looking at student status as of spring 2020.
Okay, thank you. Joe, when do we expect student billing to be available via banner?
We expect student bills to go out on or about August 15th. Again, they would typically have gone out in July. This is one of the impacts of COVID and one of the impacts of all the uncertainty that we were faced throughout the spring and into the early summer. But we do expect them to go out on or about August 15th. Also, to follow up on the student activities question, the $175, we have reached out, Dave Zwankowski, our business director of our business office, has reached out to the student leaders. They'll work with him. If we get a better number or a lower number or a different number than the $175 and we can get it on the bill, we'll get it on the bill. If that number is changed subsequent to bills going out, then there'll be a refund coming.
Okay. Couple questions earlier related to would employees receive hazard pay for working in person during a pandemic? Also related to that, is there any plans for increased compensation commensurate with increased workload, such as cleaning classrooms and so on?
Sure. Okay, you know, that's another very good question, the idea of hazard pay, of increased pay, any kind of salary adjustments. You know, almost all of our employees are represented by a particular bargaining unit. We have the Civil Service Employees Association, we have United University Professions, and we have the GSEU for our grad students, we have PEF, we have PBA for our university police. So any questions along the lines that would impact compensation, virtually all of those questions really are dealt with through the collective bargaining process. So if, for example, CSEA, you mentioned cleaning classrooms, Mark, our custodians, our janitorial staff who go in and clean the rooms, clean the restrooms, clean the buildings. You know, if the CSEA union and the state human resources people, if they get together and they hammer out some kind of an amendment to the contract to cover that, then of course we would honor it. But again, that's something that's out of the administration's hands and is between the various collective bargaining units and the New York State Office of Employee Relations.
Okay. Just give me a second here. Can ESF students, jumping to a different topic, can ESF students get free COVID tests at Krause?
I'm going to address, that question will be addressed in the Health and Safety, August 12th session. You know, there's going to be a number of health and safety questions that I anticipated, and when I was preparing for this session, I focused on the finances. Probably somewhere in my notes I may have that, but for right now, I'm going to hold off on giving misinformation, and instead, I will direct you either to the answers that will be provided to the chat on, from this session, or to the health and safety related town hall, which is up on your screen, August 12th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, thanks. Yep, I appreciate that. How does paid quarantine leave work for grad employees? How can we access it? How long is that paid leave?
I'm going to have to get back to you folks on that. I don't have the answer right now. But
So
again, it'll be one of these questions that we research and make sure we get you the right information.
A question that's come up a couple of times in the chat is what happens if SU closes?
Wow. They'll have a lot of students to send home, that's for sure. You know, it's one of these hypotheticals. Let me try to address it best I can. If Syracuse University closes, it would likely be in part driven by a mandate from the County Department of Health or the State Department of Health. And chances are, if our neighbor has to close and send students home because they're directed to do so by the municipal or the State Department of Health, chances are pretty good that that same mandate would apply to ESF. If in fact Syracuse University decides on their own, absent of any dictate or mandate from either the municipal Department of Health or the State Department of Health, if they decided to do it on their own, we would then, of course, have to reassess what we're doing here. We would have to consider why they decided to send folks home. Is there something specific about Syracuse University that doesn't apply to ESF? Or is it something in the general population that, you know, if it impacts Syracuse University, is going to impact ESF, and we also decide to close? So that's not a direct answer, but it kind of, I think, provides some context into the kinds of things we'd have to be thinking about in the event that Syracuse University, is, for whatever reason, either being directed to close or closing on their own, actually sent their students home sometime mid-semester.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Some questions related specifically to international students. Number one, what type of financial assistance is available for grad international students who will be attending online while abroad during the fall? Mark?
For international students, unfortunately, there is typically no eligibility for any of the federal student aid, but at the graduate level, that is typically only federal student loans anyway. So I think for any graduate students, the best potential source of funding in what's known as the gift aid category, meaning free money like scholarships and grants, would actually be through the Office of Instruction and Graduate Studies, and typically in the form of assistantships, either research assistantships or teaching assistantships.
Okay. This might have been on one of your slides, Joe, but I think this is a question from Mark. What is the cost of one online research credit for a doctoral international student who is located abroad?
Off the top of my head, I do not know that number.
Okay, well, we've got, Dave is checking for that, so I'll get back to the answer on that one. Third question here, which fees will be waived for grad international students attending online classes while abroad? Which fees will be waived?
I'm not sure of that answer. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to give misinformation, so we'll make sure we get the exact answer to that one.
All right, and then the last question relates to, again, online status. So we will get that to you as well, and I think that's going to be covered in the email anyhow, but we'll be sure it's covered in the email that goes to all the grad students early next week. Okay, Dave, you get, yeah, okay, Joe, you want to answer that question about that?
Can you repeat the question so I
Yep.
can?
It's, what's the cost of one online research credit for a doctoral international student who is located abroad?
$963. That's 1 credit hour, the tuition for any non-resident graduate student. 1 credit hour, tuition, $963. And actually, what I'm reading from, this is what we post, this is one of the schedules we posted online. So if you go online, as I said, you'll not only see the annual and semester numbers that I spoke of, but you'll also see all of the prorated tuition and fee numbers relative to part-time students. So if you're taking 6 credit hours and you're a New York State resident, what's the tuition, what are the fees? They're all broken down on these sheets. If you go to the esf.edu/Bursar website, when you land on that page, right in the middle on a yellow column towards the top, you'll see the link. And it'll provide about a half a dozen pages similar to this. Find what cohort you're in, and you'll be good to go.
Okay, Stephanie, who is from our communications office, Stephanie, would you mind looking at the Google Doc and seeing, I think I got them all there, and I'm just scanning through the chat right now to make sure that we've hit as many of these as we can. So just bear with me here. There's a lot of chat going on, so just give me a second to continue to scroll down. One person mentions no emails ever get sent to parents. I'm not sure about that, but
Yeah, that shouldn't be the case. We do send emails to parents. I had referenced one earlier, the July 30th email from Provost Dr. Newman. No? Stephanie shaking your head?
We send emails to students.
To students, I'm sorry. Okay,
In many cases, the email will ask students to
okay.
share it with their.
Stephanie's clarifying it for me. It's 8:15. I guess I'm not as sharp as I was an hour earlier. The question is emails going to parents. Correct. So we do send emails. The July 30th email went to students. We encourage them to share it with their parents. So that's how I would address that question, or that statement, I should say.
Mark, I think this has to do with CARES. It's sometimes hard to tell what question it's being asked because it refers to an earlier one and there's other chats in between. I think this has to do with CARES. What percent, I'm going to assume, CARES money have you already given away?
Right now, we've only given a very small percentage of the money officially. That was in the Phase 1 process, which we anticipated in Phase 1 we were going to receive upwards of 1,000 applications, and we ended up receiving about 120 so far, and it's been a very long process for the committee to review each of those. So in terms of official amount spent, you can find that right on the CARES Act page. It's actually listed there as part of our reporting requirements. But I can say that over the last 3 days, we have had a significant jump in what's going to be awarded based on our Phase 2 operations. And I believe the timing is good in that those went out last week, and I think students are starting to receive those and return them very quickly. So we're going to see that number jump pretty soon, I think. We've already gotten, in the last 2 days, about 70 or so forms returned.
Okay. This was a comment, but we don't have any access to anything on campus. I think that's referring to right now, because the buildings are locked. So, yeah, Joe, you want to?
Okay, we have locked down many of the buildings. Doesn't mean you can't get into the buildings, but there's, in many cases, just one entrance. We've locked them down over the summer due to the COVID pandemic and our need to keep everyone safe and to de-densify. I've talked to our chief, our police chief, Tom Leroy. I talked to him about that just the other day, as a matter of fact, and I mentioned to Tom that we needed to go back to the typical building lockdown schedule, given the fact that our students are coming back. So that should change pretty quickly.
Okay, jumping back to the Google Doc. What is the URL for Banner? I have trouble finding it in the link through esf.edu. Okay, we're checking on that, and we'll get that to you.
It's, if I
Yep, go ahead.
It's actually a bit of a long URL, to be honest, so it's very hard to spell it out for you. I don't even know if I have it exactly right, but I would again suggest that if you go to the financial aid page, which was linked earlier in the show, on the top right of all the financial aid pages is a link to the portal, which would take you directly to the financial aid portion. But from there, you can navigate to any part of the portal that you need to. And that address is just esf.edu/financial aid. And again, the top right corner of all of our pages have those links. Also, another way to get there, if you're used to going to the My ESF portal, if you go directly there, prior to signing in the way you used to, right at the very top middle of the page is a box which has a message about the new portal, and within that message is a link that will take you directly to the new self-service portal.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think I didn't fully ask this question, or this is a follow-up question. So this again relates to the billing for this semester. So again, where will they find it? When is it due? And is there any difference for the Ranger School?
Where will they find it?
We usually send an email blast out.
Yeah, the bills are, we're hoping to get them out on or about the 15th. There's usually, our general practice is to provide an email, which would have a link to get you to the bill, correct? I'm looking over to Dave.
I think, Mark, you want to also chime in?
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate. It's pretty much the same method that we use for notifications of financial aid. So there'd be a notice that would be sent to the students by email that would include a link to the location, and it will be in the new self-service portal that we've been talking about. So as soon as that comes out, the student should go to that. Another note here in terms of communications, those bills again go to the students, because technically it is the student's bill, even though in reality others may be helping to pay those charges. But the student needs to take that responsibility to make sure they share that information with anyone who may be helping them cover those bills.
Okay, something I addressed earlier, but the question came up again, and I think it is important. So this relates to student employees, grad student employees in particular, not getting emails. So this did come up in the earlier town hall. We started looking into it again immediately afterwards and have found that there's a number of issues here. Some students' mailboxes are full, so they're going to need to self-monitor that. That's part of the problem. We use Constant Contact as one of the mechanisms for some of the most important emails we sent out. We think that maybe SU with the syr.edu email addresses, we think there might be a problem with those getting through. We're looking into that. But we also want to be sure that the grad students who are our employees are indeed listed on the employee list, so that you indeed are getting all the emails that faculty and staff get. So we are looking into that. We realize that that's a serious issue, particularly since Dean Lombard said this morning that email is our primary mode. It's not the only mode, but it's our primary mode to get back to you, so we want to be sure that you're getting the emails. Many have gone out. A lot of them are archived on our website, but we will be working on this to make sure that we correct any deficiencies there. We also recognize some people have opted out of emails. You can do that with Constant Contact, so we're going to give instructions how to check whether you have opted out inadvertently. I think we've gotten most everything. There were a lot of questions about how to declare online. Again, I'm not punting on that. We just know that there's going to be detail. There's still some detail being worked out, so that will come early next week, and we'll be sure to share these questions with the people that are working on that to be sure that you get that information. I think we're good. Again, we will answer all these. If there's something I missed, it was not purposeful, and we'll be sure that we answer them in this live doc. We'll transition the chat questions over to the live doc and be sure we get the answers there. But I think that's it. We really appreciate your attention tonight and staying with us. Thank you. Yeah, upcoming schedule again, we have the health and safety, which is a very important one, next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, same channel. And there are others, as I mentioned earlier, on Instagram and Facebook Live. I don't think we have any other Facebook Live scheduled right now, but I'm sure we will have others. And just stay tuned to the website, the esf.edu/restart website. That's where all these virtual meetings are being listed. Again, thanks, everybody.